Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome again to another Talk Architecture podcast episode continuation, or the part two of the one that I discussed about how you would recognize the architecture students' talents or knowledge and skills after a certain time or period of time where they're about to graduate. And I gave three characteristics at the end of the day: the entrepreneurial, the traditional architect, and the third one, which is the one that still has to find themselves. So it is about the student. It is not about a fresh graduate working. It is about the student. And we could actually discern whether at certain points they show certain traits already. But it is always acknowledged and observed about that student, about students in general, this is not specific, after they graduated. Now, I did believe earlier that I could actually observe this for the ones that graduated after 5 years and working for a few years, because I wanted to see what happens when they started working after a few years. The one that I was looking at were the ones that I was verifying or validating this opinion. It's about 3 years or 3.5 years of working life. It'll be validated further, obviously, this theory in the future. Or I could do this research with another set of students. Now the thing is, I had a good conversation with a student who did not do part two, or did not do the 5 years. She did only the 3 years. And this student is doing very well, working outside, and may not even need a part two. Now, this is particularly a generational sort of observation. The Gen Zs, actually, or maybe the Zillennials. What I would like to say is that students of architecture who were interested in architecture, who kept on studying architecture until the 5 years is up, want to make a career out of architecture or similar industries. But those who finish only after 3 years, but still have the desire to be involved with the industry, but in a different way or a different situation, because they find themselves not able to appreciate doing another 2 years. But they find themselves developing and progressing and learning a lot in whatever they do. It could be a semi-government or an agency, a government agency, or maybe an institute, or maybe even teaching, or maybe doing projects on their own. They're kind of like entrepreneurial as well, but they decided to do it before they start again or ever considered to finish their couple of years of Masters of Architecture. Why I'm looking at this is because Is it people are getting smarter generationally compared with me and the Gen Zs? Are they really getting smarter? Because there's so much things available now, and things are being interpreted quickly, and you do some hacks. Of course, you can't replace learning properly, and there is something that you just can't do, which is shortcuts to certain type of learning. But daring and bravery could be more of the traits of this generation, the Gen Zs in particular. Yeah, I'd like to say that daringness or being brave and actually knowing how to calculate the risk to undertake those pursuits, and the whole social media thing, or the whole what is happening now in this earth, the sense of purpose could come much earlier than what some of us went through during our time. We took a long time to find out our sense of purpose, or it was like a traditional, or we followed a certain path that everyone does. Is it that there are more entrepreneurial sense among people who set out to do architecture? I'm throwing architecture out there, the traditional way of approaching architecture. I'm just throwing it out there, not literally, but in a way, giving some sort of a brainstorm session here. Why do we keep on thinking architecture that way, right? Because it's kind of comfortable. You need a certain amount of skills and certain things to actually progress, and then you have to have computational skills. But what about thinking skills? Now, thinking skills, the love of researching, the love of data, the love of being able to understand concepts quicker, not only architectural concepts. Is it for some students of architecture who are in the Gen Z era, they quickly pick up some things. If they decided not to just follow blindly, or just follow whatever the instructions that are given in the course of architecture, or became more curious or have a wonder, about things, would they be much more, shall we say, have a good start compared to their peers of the same age? This attitude, to me, could be something that they got from their own families or their parents. They could have picked up this attitude from being inspired. Or they may have some neurodivergent traits and be hyper-focused or more focused on certain things. Hence, if I was hyper-focused in drawing before, but that was during my generation. So if in this generation, if I will be hyper-focused on observation skills, analytical and critical skills, and doing research and looking at architecture from a researcher lens, I'd still be hyper-focused and I'd still be absorbing a lot of stuff and be able to work smarter and be more precise in what I want. Right now, at this age, I'm looking at a lot of social media. And a lot of interpretations already been done, so many things. It's just, I'd be discerning about it. But is it me alone? Or is it people in my generation alone who could do that? Or younger, Gen X? Could it be that those who are much younger would pick it up quicker than I did? I mean, if I was at the 5th year level, somebody could actually learn those things at the 3rd year level now. Like the hypothesis that I mentioned, coming up with problem statements, things that I struggle to understand is now much more available. And if you were to give a crash course, or you know exactly what the students should be learning and they do it a lot, they would be understanding about that quicker, about a hypothesis, about design problems and problem statements. Well, to be honest, it took me a long way. I had to understand PhD and research. They could enhance for example, design thesis, understanding about design thesis and an analysis of how hypothesis is linked to the design thesis, and how I could come up with the idea of the different types of different traits of the graduates. This is something that is not research, obviously. This is a lot of proposition about how one would look at architecture education and skills generated. Going back to the topic at hand, I did talk about those students who are from that batch, 2019-2020, who did the Petaling Jaya Old Town. And specifically, those 10 people who had a lot of, shall we say, extra time to finish off their work, actually. And we had concentrated on them a little bit longer because of the Movement Control Order, MCO, during COVID-19 pandemic situation where nobody went anywhere. When we talk about this topic earlier on 29th of April, we talk about Raymond Boo. And then after that, I talked about, in another topic, the missing skill set. And then I proposed the 3 types of students, or the 3 type of skills set. Observational, sketching, critical thinking, and analytical thinking. But in the previous episode, on 29th of April, I talk about how the entrepreneurial architect is linked to the hypothesis and understanding of the design thesis. So why I'm excited about this is because I actually had a chat with someone who did not do part 2, but they just did, their degree, the first degree. They didn't do the second degree or Master of Architecture. So, and I find this person, and even this person, agreed about the entrepreneurial side, or looking at the system rather than just the design thinking. System thinking rather than design thinking. And this is something common in this day and age. Now, I'm going back to the design thesis of the other 2 students apart from Raymond Boo, just to continue this shall we say, discussion. We have two persons. One is Wong Yi, vertical neighborhood shared space in Petaling Old Town. The other is Wong Chang-he's Old Town Botanic Gardens. I mean, I just say in general, Wong Yi did not really understand his project fully until towards the end when he discovered his hypothesis better. And Wong Chang-he's also discovered it later in semester 2 after many weeks, 3 months into the project, same as Wong Yi. So these are the two Wongs in the group that has that sense of architect entrepreneur skill set or thinking. The analytical thinking that they have is linked to the ecosystem or the system that works. The architecture is linked to how things work in an urban setting, or the many other things like education. For Chang-he, it was transportation and education. The idea of rejuvenating the botanical, a piece of land which is kind of in a linear way, which is where the railroad tracks are, and a working transport there, bringing in the station from the other side to create a gateway. Thus, the whole idea of botanical garden plus a station together in an urban setting, creating a sense of place. And in fact, this stuff they call place making, the sense of place, making it a focus for also the residents of the area, including the schools that are near the railway tracks, and making much more pedestrianized entrance, giving some sense to this old town, which we know that is just making way for more commercial buildings to be there. And then we have Yi, which is looking at a vertical, the highest building on that road, and how that could be transformed, because redundant buildings built in the 80s, so because of the outmoded, just people don't appeal to it anymore in terms of the look of it, the way it's designed, and how are you just gonna demolish it, or are you gonna retrofit it in a way that can be vibrant again for the community? So having that sort of, say, shall we say, not stratification, but getting it to be in a way the ground level, connected to the ground level by having this spiraling circulation, vertical circulation. Now, he wasn't really, Yi's vertical neighborhood shared space in PJ Old Town wasn't really, he wasn't really aware of what he was doing, but he knew he had to work with his old building, and adaptive reuse is probably something that's the first time that he encountered, and even more so taking it to another level and making like hostels or dorms for migrant workers upstairs, trying to make sense of what is an ecosystem and the context of the place. That was like a lot of stuff going on for him, because vertically is challenged, but for Chang-he, understanding that being brave and doing a project that the School of Architecture didn't want people to be doing flat buildings or just 1 or 2 story buildings. They deem it not complex enough. So he was challenged. He got over that challenge that this project is for him and not just for it's not for the grades. Though we would give him an A, but the school do not want to give him an A, obviously, because they don't look at it complex. But when we think about it, this is a very difficult topic to actually use to rejuvenate a vacant land only used for the purpose of, shall we say, transportation tracks. And really, it wasn't really much of a park where, bits and pieces were done, given out by the local authority for people to use here and there, but it wasn't really making or contributing to the sense of the architecture and urbanity of the PJO town. So this is different. These 3 projects, Raymond Boo's earlier, which I discussed in part 1, these 2 projects now, which I don't go into detail with the hypothesis, but I'm just giving the gist of how complex it is and how many, not only the design problem or the building typology, they had to deal with them, some sort of ecosystem. So the other projects were typical buildings, schools, churches, and institutional buildings that I had up there in the blog. Now, there are many challenges to a student's journey in design thesis, and design thesis is something that is different. Their own design thesis is different than other people's design thesis, and they can't refer to anyone much, and it is very introspective, and then they get feedback from the tutors, and these discussions with the tutors are very important actually for them to get an interpretation of what was the previous feedback and how they can move forward with it. In that sense, the design process is very much something that they have to do a lot of reflection, a lot of understanding of what's going on. So I'm going back to the topic that is for this episode on the architect entrepreneur hypothesis and the design thesis, and looking at those skills that the students needed. And you just take a bunch of students that year. I mean, you take on whoever they are, and it's like something that's unknown, going in a journey with them, an unknown journey where they are struggling and you just needing to hear what they have to say, and you can't fill in the blanks. You can't be the driver of their destiny. They got to do it themselves, right? It's the 5th year anyway. So in a way, in the 3rd year, you could do a similar thing, but it's much more guided, and there is much more input by the tutor. And would you find a similar number of students? So out of 10, you have 3 people who are the architect entrepreneur at that year, that 5th year. So those are characteristics that you can find if you had this set of students, or you knew of these students earlier when they were in 3rd year. You could see already that they have these tendencies, because this is what happened to me when I was talking to this person who did not go through a design thesis. And this person is confident that they don't have to go through a design thesis because they've got all the learning that they want through working. And I would have to put up my hands and say yes. So could we have many of them, or could we have more than one of them? Just say there are 40 students where I came from earlier, teaching where I thought is they have about 40 students in a batch. If you're talking about 40 students, can it be more than one? Could it be 3 or 5 students that have these tendencies? Some of them may not be continuing at that establishment, the same establishment, to do their fourth and fifth year. Some of them could be working like this person did and doing stuff on their own. There's also another student. Now I'm thinking about a CEO of it's not a startup, it's a company. But he did not do fourth and fifth year either. And he totally went for IT. Yeah. He is the CEO of this company. And to me, it's kind of amazing that he is. I don't know whether he partnered with somebody, but this is an architecture student, part 1 architecture student. He didn't bother going into fourth and fifth year either, It's really great to see such a thing because it's basically students. They happen to be in architecture. And yeah, it's a integrated vehicle tracking and fleet management company, which has a lot of customers from the Southeast Asian region. So this is quite exceptional what this part 1 student just took off. He went and worked and he went into IT, he went into stuff and the entrepreneurial spirit. I didn't have this student as my student under me, so I wouldn't know of him. I wouldn't have an inkling of his tendency to be able to do this. So just a thought today on the possibilities of the architect entrepreneur and how they came about. What is it that makes them different than others? It could be purely they have had this sort of tendencies when they were much younger, even in secondary school, or the way they observe and analyze and think critically from a much younger age. And architecture happened to be a course that they took. And they needed just to have that degree, and then they would fly after that. As we are, shall we say, a victim of our circumstance, a victim of our situation and conditions, and our mindsets. So if we have a certain thinking that we need to follow certain ways, we'll just follow. I did that. But there are also the questions and the wonder and the curiosity that I had. And if time is not real, I could have done it when I was younger. It's just I wasn't brave enough, or that the situation or the context in general, because of that generation that I was in, was not really helpful or did not really help me. Or maybe because knowledge-based society was not the main thing during my time. It was more technological-based society, or you know what I mean? So the architectural school could have helped me. I often wondered the discussions about architectural association, why a lot of other entrepreneurs, though, maybe there's a spirit in it for innovation and curiosity that helped them actually be that earlier on. Are we stuck with this traditional architect sort of mindset in architecture school? These are things that I wonder now. And if you come to the end of this podcast, thank you for listening until the end of this podcast to actually want to come to this point, which I wonder with you. It suddenly came to my mind that we are thinking about this, thinking about just generation and how people learn things quicker in this knowledge-based society with, information technology and computer science investment and technological investment. Yes, advancement, I mean. Do stick around for this discussion. It's still in my head now, and it could come up again, and maybe it'll appear somewhere else as well in our readings. Thank you for listening. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are.